This podcast is brought to you by Spirits and Distilling for those who make and drink great spirits. Join our free email newsletter for technical and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Learn more at spiritsanddistilling.com.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast. My name is Sydney. We are on episode number 28. And today we are going to be talking with my good friend, Brett Steigerwaldt. He's the head distiller for Lyon Rum in St. Michael's, Maryland. I've been talking about getting a rum distiller on this podcast for a hot minute, and Brett is my rum distiller. We're going to be talking all about rum today. He's also a consulting distiller for Rosalie Bay Distillery in Dominica, Brett? Dominica. My mom used to be a travel agent, and she used to do hunting and fishing excursions to Dominica when I was like a baby, and she is obsessed with it. So I've heard about Dominica my entire life. So it's really cool that you're working on this project there. Brett is also a chair on the education committee of the Maryland Distillers Guild. So he works with our buddy Eli, who we had on the podcast a few episodes back. And he also got his master's in brewing and distilling from Harriet Watt. So he knows his shit. I'm really excited to have him on today. But before we get into all things rum, G&D Chillers understands that each distillery's chilling requirements are unique. On every distillery project, G&D offers the front-end design and engineering your team needs at no cost to you. Hank Presley, head distiller at Moondrop Distillery, says, "Early on, we made a decision to partner with quality American-made companies. One of those companies was G&D Chillers, and we are proud of that choice. Our equipment from them has run long and strong. We put our first barrel in our rick house in September 2021, and over the past 3 years, we have put back more than 540 barrels. What a great decision to team up with a company like G&D Chillers. Reach out for a quote today at gdchillers.com. Howdy, Brett.
Hey, Sydney. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for talking to me about something that is not distilled from grain. Something a little bit outside of my expertise. I'm really excited to talk about rum today. I've made a small amount of rum, but it was kind of by accident because someone gave me molasses during the pandemic and we played around with it. But really excited to get your perspective on it because rum is such a versatile spirit. I think it's one of the more versatile spirits in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really cool about rum is, you can have, sugarcane derivatives, and those derivatives do have a sense of place, like terroir and all those types of things. But at the same time, depending on what place in the world, you're going to get different yeast, different flora and fauna, different production techniques, different fermentation techniques, different still designs, etc. So, like, I have some Japanese rum from Okinawa that is crazy, but it's very much in like the awamori shochu style of how they make it. And then I've got some other stuff like Clarin from Haiti, and I've got some crazy funky high ester rums from Jamaica. And it's all rum. They just go about doing it differently because rum, in the sense, just like whiskey in the origins, were all tied to whatever was available there once you got your equipment. So you just had to make do with what you had, and you would figure out how to make it work for your process. And over time, a few generations, you get these beautifully, vibrant spirits and that are tied to history. So it's pretty cool stuff.
I love that. Tell me a little bit about Lyon Rum, where you are distilling.
Yeah, so I've been with Lyon since 2016. I quit a corporate engineering job. I was just tired of being a controls engineer. It just wasn't really that meaningful, being in a factory all the time. And I happened to meet someone that knew Jamie, quit my job, moved to Maryland, didn't know anyone, and here we are. I've been the head distiller here since 2018. So at Lyon, we pride ourselves in using American sugarcane products to make our stuff. So we get our blackstrap molasses and raw cane sugar. So think of like sugar in the raw, but even more unrefined, from Lula Westfield in Louisiana. So it's about an hour and a half west of New Orleans. It's a family-run operation. A lot of other smaller rum producers get sugar cane products from them. So it's very much kind of in vogue where we get it. And we've been around since 2013. And we've been doing really great stuff. So it's double pot distilled. We use a neutral yeast because we want to showcase those base ingredients. So what we find with our fermentation process, which is about 5 to 7 days, depending, longer in the winter because we don't have temperature control. So we tend to get like almost like super creaminess and like nice rich molasses notes from the molasses, but you also get like this coconut creme kind of note, like if you have like coconut icing. And then you get this like grassy, slightly funky, slightly herbaceous, like little almost artificial fruit notes from the raw cane sugar. And we tend to collect our spirit portion from like 80% down to about 70. Just depends on the charge. So it's usually about a 10% window. And that unaged rum forms the base of everything else that we do. So we have a dark rum where we hand make a caramel and blend that in just to give it a hint of smoky richness because, we are in a sailing town. So, those dark and stormy type drinks are very popular. It's also really good with cigars. And fortunately, there's a cigar maker right across the street. So we have a lot of people who will come and just hang out in the old mill district where we are. The white rum also goes into used bourbon barrels. Right now, we get them we've been getting them for several years now from our good friends at Kings County in Brooklyn. We have been using their 10s and 15s historically. So it's about up to 2 years in the barrels. And we're trying to do something more of like a reposado style of rum in the sense where we don't want to lose that beautiful unaged rum notes, but we just kind of want to round it out and pick up some of those bourbon notes, some of the grain notes as well, like honey, butterscotch, caramel, vanilla, just to round it out. And that's really fun. And then we've got a whole bunch of liqueurs. That was one of the reasons why getting into rum really worked. I've been making liqueurs since I was 19 in a dry county in Tennessee. So rum is a really good base for liqueurs. And as someone who's been making liqueurs for 20 years now, it's great. So we make several. So the one that got me hired was my coffee liqueur. We use chocolate shells and fresh roasted coffee. So it's going to give you this mocha-esque note. It's kind of like having a really good milk chocolate, like a milk or dark chocolate bar with coffee. And it makes really good after dinner drinks or espresso martinis. I like doing it as a play on a Ramos Gin Fizz just to get the frothy egg white. And it's really fun. We also have a rum old fashioned. So that's our rockin' rum where we built off that dark rum tradition where we hand make a caramel, except I throw in fresh orange peels, which expresses all the oils into that. We then blend that into the rum, remove the peels, and then we infuse real Luxardo cocktail cherries, bitter and sweet orange peel, and finish with cocktail bitters. It is 42%. It's delicious. I always tell people just put it on a big ice cube, stir it for about 10 to 20 seconds. It's phenomenal. We also have a curacao. So think of it like if Grand Marnier or Combier or any of those other triple sec-esque products went to the Caribbean and kind of found themselves. So you're going to have bitter and sweet orange peel, cinnamon, clove, cardamom, bitter botanicals. It's awesome. You can kind of play with it like an Amaro, but it makes really good, it's very versatile for cocktails, whether that's a margarita, because the bitterness really balances out everything else. Or, on its own, it's really nice. And then we also have a coconut rum where we hand toast 75 pounds of coconut, and then we kind of have a proprietary way of infusing it into the rum. It is a coconut rum liqueur. So it smells like summer, tastes like beautiful coconut cake. It is dangerously drinkable. I mean, like 3 ounces of that, an ounce of lime juice, boom, you've got your daiquiri. It's the taste of summer. And then we also make a blackberry rum where last year I think we picked about 1,600 pounds by hand, 30 miles away. From the distillery. Woof. And that infuses into the rum for about a month. We rack it. Then it spends time on French and American oak before getting balanced by a Demerara simple syrup. Tastes very much like a ruby port wine. And you can kind of sub it for, vermouth and some, cocktails. And then we've got a variety of other things. We make a pineapple rum, which is what I've been managing today. We've got dehydrators all throughout the building. So I think we're going to go through about 5,000 pounds of pineapple this year. Because we're doing a double batch. So we literally get fresh pineapple, peel it, slice it thin, dehydrate them until they're like almost like pineapple chips. And then we infuse them. And it's literally just pineapples in rum. And then it spends time on some French oak to kind of round that out. And then we rack and filter that. And it's 57% and delicious. Makes amazing daiquiris. We also
I'm just picturing like a fleet of dehydrators that you just have like 100 just lined up like little soldiers
Oh,
on your distillery floor.
I wish we had that many. We have 4 right now. They're double decker. Before we had those, and we had a bunch of other ones. So we get about 6 pounds a day. So, it takes well over a month to get enough. So it's just every day we're pineappling in a sense. And then we're all yeah, I know. It's like every day we're hustling, but
no, it's great. Yeah.
Every day we're
1,000%. I heard the
pineappling.
song. Yeah, I heard the song in my head.
I know.
You need
we're
a
back to
t-shirt that says that.
Back to 2010 and all the fun times.
Before the world got really dark. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
The better,
I know.
The better timeline.
Yeah, I know. I think back at that. I'm like, man, that was great. It's like, I wish somebody would have told me those are the good old days. Kind of felt that way, but And then we also have a black rum where we kind of change up the caramel ratio for the dark, and then it spends time on American oak. It's awesome, and it's got a little bit of richness to it, so it's definitely more of like an after dinner sipper kind of thing. Definitely pairs very well with cigars and other types of things. And then we have a handful of other things that we're working on. I mean, we're working on a falernum just for the cocktail lounge that we have here. It's called the Suns.
It's golden hour, right?
Yeah, so golden hour. Thank you. So we're working on a falernum just for the our cocktail lounge and like event space, because we have to use we can only use alcohol that we make. So it's a great challenge for me because having lived in Europe for a little bit, I love a lot of those European herbal type of drinks. So it'll give me a chance to make like things like a Suze or a Benedictine or a Chartreuse or these other kind of fun things, or an Ameripicon or a Picon and all these types of things. So it's going to be really fun. But the falernum is going to be awesome. Like one of our distillers, Erica, who kind of wears many hats at distiller. She's a badass. She made this recipe, so we call it the Falerica. It's awesome, and we cannot wait to have that. It makes one of our signature drinks at the golden hour. So it's pretty cool stuff. Yeah, we make a lot of fun stuff here.
I need you to name it Falerica because that's the best thing I've ever heard. Falernum is kind of the gateway drug to tiki additives. Are you going to make an orgeat as well?
Oh, she's already working on that. We're just trying to figure out how to, keep it stable and everything. I said if we can make that anywhere from like 15 to 30%, we're gonna have some fun. I just say why not, right? Like we've got rum, and rum is still versatile, so why not play?
Yeah. And orgeat's delicious. I like it in coffee. God, it's so good.
And then one of our other distillers, Nick, he is of Iranian descent, so he's working on an Iran-inspired liqueur or spirit of some kind. So he and I are going to be working to figure that out. So those will be things that we can showcase, like little one-off fun projects, at this new space. So if people love it, then who knows, they could become products. But definitely, I think Falerica is high on the list because everyone wants it. It's so good.
Yeah, for sure. So many really cool things that stuck out to me as you were describing your portfolio. It's vast. It sounds like there is something that appeals to every style of drinker, whether you like a flavored spirit or you like a traditional rum. And your flavored spirits are done with whole ingredients that have a terroir and an agricultural air to them. So you might see variances each year. And that's the kind of flavored spirit that I love, and then the reposado style on your maturation, that the way that you described it, you don't want to overshadow the flavors that you worked really hard to create. And I that's always how I describe people that aren't unfamiliar with barrel-aged gin. That's why I love barrel-aged gin, is because it's a fun botanical that creates some really unique flavors that can act as a really harmonious agent and smooth edges, but you don't want to drown out that bouquet that you worked on. And then neutral yeast caught my ear. Tell me more about neutral yeast, because it's pretty common, actually, I would say, on the rum side, because rum, and I guess maybe for me, I mean, it definitely is challenging. So I'm not going to say it's not challenging to make, but we did make whiskey initially when I was hired, and that was fun. But, after 2018 and we had more Maryland distilleries making whiskey, really cool. We've done our part. We played a role in this. We're going to back away and do the thing that we started with anyways. And so I guess, making rum is seen as a challenge. I mean, there's definitely a lot of things that can go wrong. If you don't get your nutrients right, you don't get a lot of other things right. But
it's pretty common to try like things like a champagne style yeast or something like that, just because those things allow, they're so efficient in terms of fermentation. They're so flexible in terms of fermentation range, in terms
And
of pH
resilient.
range. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
really resilient. So it's usually like, oh, hey, you're new to distilling, try EC1118 from Lallemand, or it works, right? And if you're having trouble fermenting with that, usually it's probably due to, say, like a pH drop or a nutrient issue. And then if that's not working, then you can go to other places. And companies like Lallemand and Fermentus and all these places, they're super helpful. And they want you to be successful. So I'm really good friends with most of the yeast suppliers, just because I do a lot of trials and I publish and talk about it. So but yeah, those neutral yeasts are key, because if you don't understand what your base ingredients taste like based on your process, where are you going to go? Because, like, say you picked a Hefeweizen yeast because I had a Hefeweizen yeast, let's try it. Well, you're going to get a banana and clove note. Okay, that's great. Does it work with your profile? You don't know. So I always recommend to people, try with something neutral, understand your base ingredients, and then from there you can play with ratios to see, oh, I want this expressed more, so maybe more sugar, less molasses, or more molasses, less sugar, or whatever. And then you at least have a starting point for you to go on this journey. So understand your base, then you can build from there.
Well, and I'm sure that allows you also to detect, any differences between batches of molasses that you get in, because as molasses is a byproduct, I know historically it can be kind of unpredictable between batches that you get. And that's kind of one of the big challenges of working with molasses and rum production.
Yeah, especially for us, we often find, so one of the things we were able to do in 2017 is the whole team went down to New Orleans for kind of a fun team building event. But we did help with the sugarcane harvest at Lula Westfield. So we all got to drive the combines. It was so cool. But one of the things we learned was all of the molasses is stored in these giant tanks. So when they're pulling it, more than likely that it's relatively consistent. But you do see variation and you do see changes in yield. For us, what we've noticed is, because we're really tight on rehydration temperatures and those types of things. But what we've noticed is sometimes, because we have to clean out and sterilize, like we'll clean out and sanitize our totes and send them back down. So sometimes you might have an issue with, maybe the tote wasn't fully cleaned and maybe there was something like a dormant infection because of the high osmotic pressure. Nothing's going to happen until you dilute it. And also because we share the facility with another brand that makes whiskey and agave and a bunch of other things, if the mash tun that we share doesn't get fully cleaned out, that also can inhibit. So we have to be really good on the handovers and those types of things. But we do see variation in the molasses. And we do see changes in yield. Usually for us, if it's really cold or really hot, because we don't have temperature control, we'll just not produce, because we'll see a dramatic drop in yield simply from the fact that we'll see a 30-degree temperature rise in our fermentations, because we do 1,400-gallon fermentations. So we'll see a 30-degree rise. So like in the summer, we're not even heating up the water. We're literally just mixing it until everything's homogenized, and then pitching yeast, and it'll start at, say, like 76 degrees. And if we don't get it lower than that, or if we're having any issues, it will spike. It's usually like day 2 is when it spikes, and we're sitting there having a baby, or like, okay, come on, please don't hit that. And then we do have a way of cooling it, but we're hesitant to use it because of the impeller. We don't want to shred up the yeast. I know the yeast are pliable cells, but we're just been very hesitant to use that. But like on those types of things, if you get up there and like, oh shit, I see a glycerol sheen. I'm like,
Stress.
yeah, it's like I see all these things.
Stress.
Like, yeah, it's like I see unhappy yeast signals. So we just, you make do, you process it, and then if that comes through, you're just really, really tight on your cut. So one of the things that we do to mitigate any of those things is, our stripping runs are always vatted. So they're always getting added to the low wines tank, and then all of our hearts portions, we quality control and taste throughout the run, and then we taste, the aggregate at the end. And if there's any potential note where it's like, oh, this is slightly different, well, that would be destined for like a very super flavorful liqueur. It's not bad in any way, but it would be something like, oh, we'll just put that in the coffee rum. It's fine, because like I charcoal filter the hearts beforehand just to smooth out the body and give it a little bit of softness for those liqueurs to build off of. So we have ways of mitigating that. But also all of our hearts are vatted too, and they've been vatting in our 500-gallon stainless steel tank since we got it in 2018. It's never gone below half. So it's always new rum getting mixed with really old rum, which allows us to maintain a house character.
Nice. I'm a big fan of vatting, especially low wines. Vat your low wines. If you are fermenting something, vat your low wines. Don't do one stripping run and then one finishing run. Man, you get so much more continuity of flavor and stable flavors that way. Big fan of that. Really interesting that, there's so many different camps of fermentation I've found in rum. You have some distillers, aka Jamaica, that like really let it run wild and run amok and, really utilize environmental sources of flavor, outside bacteria, wild yeast and things like that. So from what I'm hearing from you, you do like, we don't want outside contamination, but it sounds like you let your yeast do their thing without constricting it too much in terms of keeping it cool during fermentation.
Yeah, we as long as we hit our start temperatures and the climatic conditions are okay, we're usually fine. Like our honey, our sweet spots tend to be the shoulder seasons around summer. So like spring up to a point, and usually what happens at those times is we'll double up, we'll maximize our fermentation capacity. So as we go through these totes of molasses, we'll end up cleaning them out and we'll use them as like temporary low wines vessels, and we'll have to clean those out as well before we send them back. But we do that so we can maximize the good times. And then in the summer, it's kind of hit or miss. If we see a window where it's like, okay, we'll be fine, then we'll just try to go cool. And, it's interesting because at that point, you don't want, when you're rehydrating your temperature for your yeast, you have to shift that because you don't want to be more than about 18 degrees off from that because you don't want to shock the yeast. So we have to, there's a lot of like finesse, like finagling and finesse that goes into working with that. And speaking to those, fermentation traditions, there's a lot to be learned, and there's a lot of, justifiable reasons for, like, for example, what they do in Jamaica. Like in Jamaica, they use either wild fermentations, or if they're doing, pitched yeast, though they tend to pick ones that are more acid loving, like a Schizosaccharomyces pombe. It's a fission yeast. So that yeast is very, very, very slow, and you're not going to get high alcohol yields of that. But what it allows is the, bacteria that are present to really thrive because it's an acid loving yeast. It's like, oh, cool, whatever. It's acidic. I don't care. But it's just going to do its thing slowly. And often in those traditions, they'll have, like, the way that I think of it is, like, I'm not a painter, but, for those of you that are, think of it like a color palette. You can have this really beautiful, vibrant product, aka high ester Jamaican or more funky Jamaican rum. Well, how do you get there? Well, you want a little bit of, say, acetic acid. You want a little bit of lactic acid. You want a little bit of butyric acid. You want, different other things as well, but you have to know when to utilize them in the fermentation process. So, for example, like their cane acid, which is its own tank, and it's basically spoiled cane juice. So think of it like cane vinegar. They'll add some of that in with the wash. They'll add something from the dunder pit or the dunder tank, which is just spent wash. So it's got dead yeast and nitrogen sources and all that. So they're constantly cultivating it. So over time, it will develop this very vibrant lactobacillus culture. They're going to add some of that in to help acidify it with the molasses and the water. So they'll use like the cane vinegar and the dunder as a diluting agent for the molasses. And then after fermentation, depending on what they're trying to make, and Hamden, so that's HAMPDEN, they released the Hamden 8 collection, which is a very, very good thing to buy if you just want to understand how fermentation diversity will lead to flavor complexity.
Great rum.
They map it out. It's really great. So the muck, which is the butyric acid source, is added at the end of fermentation once it's completed, and then they let that go for anywhere from like a few days to 10 days. So it'll have this whole funky bacterial fermentation before they process those that wash through their the retort stills. So by doing that, even though your wash is only ended up like 2 to 4%, so you're sacrificing yield to make very strong flavors. And most of the time, it's an additive or a blending agent, whether that's your unaged rum or as part of your overall maturation program. So like when people hear that, they're like, "Oh, I'm trading yield for flavor." I'm like, you are, but you're being strategic. You're making this very intense, very intensely flavored, rum that you can add in at proportions to whatever blend you're making, whether it's an unaged or an aged blend. And you're just going to get these pops of color that you would not get otherwise. And, they have other ways of doing it. Like this gentleman named H.H. Cousins had a distillation-based method for making high ester rums by concentrating what was already present in the low wine retorts or the low and high wine retorts. And, I cover that in my master's thesis, and I'm happy to, like, if there's show notes or whatever, I can send you that, because I kind of process diagrammed it. But that was all and most of these traditions come from the high tariffs that were around in the late 1800s to the 1920s in the European market, for example, in Germany, because they were trying to combat fake Jamaican rum over in Europe. Is why a lot of these practices exist, because they were making like flavored rum. And the reasons Cousins exists, for example, is because all those practices I just mentioned would get more and more acidic over the course of the year. And because they're pulling from the same tanks for their more neutral rums, it would have, a detrimental effect on their ability to make those. So there's all kinds of fun historical reasons why these techniques exist. And that's just Jamaica, like, Martinique and Guadeloupe and Réunion and all these other places have, like high ester or grand aroma style traditions as well. And it's similar, and it is molasses based as well. So there's all kinds of fun things in the wild world of rum.
Yeah, 1,000%. I can picture all of my like whiskey distiller friends listening to this and like clutching their pearls at the mention of butyric acid.
Oh, baby vomit. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's prominent as someone who's dealt with it in her career.
We have too.
Yeah. Unwanted, it's not great. But, you talk a lot about esters and, rum heads, rum distillers, all about the esters, really, really emphasize that. Whiskey distillers, they have a lot of levers they can pull, be it, yeast strains to a degree. I don't know if we're as sophisticated as the rum industry is with yeast strains. You have grain, you have toasting and char levels that you can mix and match as well. But rum distillers, you have so many other levers to pull in terms of esterification, and you have a very sophisticated point of view when it comes to esterification. And I know you have a lot of thoughts about how the whiskey industry could be utilizing ester formation in mashing and fermentation, or fermentation and distillation more, and maturation. You want to go a little bit into that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, if you look behind me, you can't, your listeners can't see my photo, but it's when I was in ACSA in Denver in 2024, I went to the Leopold Brothers. And actually, this is what I was talking with Todd, and it was just briefly mentioned that, and I might be extrapolating here, but he was attempting to play with something like a dunder or grain-based muck pit, because I mean, if you look at, like, say, the distilling traditions of China, like Baijiu and the whole solid state, they're utilizing specific, like, things like molds and bacteria and yeast to make these, like, highly concentrated starters called chu that they then seed their grain beds for their solid state fermentation. So they're far exceeding what Jamaica makes in terms of esters. Like a lot of the strong aroma Baijius, like you're looking at like 2,000 plus like grams per hectoliter absolute alcohol. So for whiskey distillers, yeah.
Really quick before you go, Todd Leopold gets brought up in every single episode that I do. And I swear to God, if you've listened to this podcast, he is coming in 2025. He is going to be a guest. Carry on. But it's like, so funny. Every time I talk to a guest, we always talk about Todd.
And, he'd be proud. I'm wearing my Carhartt overalls and my flannel. Yeah. So, I'm just trying to be that. I mean, we all
awesome. Try to be Todd. He's so my white whale.
He's just, I adore him. Like, you cannot have a bad time. He's just so genuine and kind and just lovely person. But yeah, so it just got me thinking. It's just like, why don't we have high ester bourbon? It's a very simple question. Obviously, it's very complex, but you have every single thing that you need to do that. Like, you can literally make, like, for example, if you break down classic Jamaican, like funky quote rum, you're going to use one of several things to make your flavors. You may or may not do wild fermentation. Okay, fine. If you don't want to do that, totally fair. But they're going to use multiple acidifying techniques to seed their fermentations with bacteria that they can control. in a sense, to achieve the flavors that they want. Now, they have a long history of this, whereas in whiskey, you don't necessarily, but you do actually, because the whole sour mash backset, right? Like you're already doing lactic acid, right? Like lactic acid done in the right proportion is going to acidify your wash. It's going to help eliminate most of the other bacteria because you're going to bring the pH down. But what's also going to happen is you're going to get ethyl lactate, which is going to give you this nice creaminess on the palate. You're also going to get like citrus and tropical notes.
Yeah,
Great,
it's
delightful.
something my yeasting system that I'm building right now incorporates a lactic can for developing our yeast and naturally souring it.
Right.
Yeah.
So the things that I'm going to be proposing, actually, I'm scrambling to finish my presentation for the James B. Beam Institute conference, and it's due on the 3rd. But it's going to cover that. So basically, it's okay. If you have all this grain, why don't you contemplate making like a grain vinegar? I mean, you have malt vinegar. Why can't you have these? Because I mean, corn is so aromatic. Why don't you make like a corn-based vinegar, or make your mash bill strategically into like set aside a portion of that, like some of the wash that you've made, just drain it, let it just get funky and wild, and just, if you're a bigger brand or if you're at a university, you can really check and guide that, that bacterial fermentation to achieve what you want. No one's really done it. Okay, cool. You have this sour mash tradition. So the lactic acid side is going to be easier. The things that they don't really have is you don't really have pits to, where you continuously top it up with spent wash after each, stripping run. So you're not continuously adding nitrogen and like nutrient sources to it. So you're not going to get this big, huge colony that you would if you were to have this over a long period of time. The one that's going to be really hard to implement, and it's mainly because there's not much written on it, and most of the distilleries are very tight-lipped about it, is the muck process. And that's going to be a combination of like spent wash. It's going to be your dead yeast in the tank bottoms. It's going to be spent low and high wines and a bunch of other stuff that just literally goes through a very long putrefactive breakdown. It smells god awful. And, but it, if used in the right way at the right time, will give you overripe fruit notes. It'll give you all those pineapple and tropical citrus notes, those heavy, rich, overripe fruit notes. And again, I'm not suggesting that would work for every whiskey, but if you were to, someone like the Beam Institute were to actually consider this, they could sit there and trial it on a pilot, because that's all I'm proposing. Just try it on a pilot level with all of their awesome equipment in the lab. They could sit there and document that whole process. And then they would say, okay, cool, we've got this. If we add it at this amount at this time and allow it to undergo these conditions, you can achieve those precursors that'll pair super well with your distillation process. Now, you may lose all that if you're going through a big column and a doubler, fine. But if you're going through other ways, you may not. Now, the Cousins process that I did mention, you could, for example, concentrate the leftover acids and all that in the doubler, for example, or if you're doing like a 3-chamber system, which is already delicious, all that funky, oily stuff, you can concentrate all that. And by using his process for that next set of runs, you could supercharge that, or you could do it over a series of runs where you collect enough to do the process. You could supercharge that so that the next run that you do will produce this very intensely flavorful, many thousands, grams per hectoliter absolute alcohol of esters that then you can use to strategically dose your products for, maturation or whatever. And all of this still conforms to the TTD guidance. Now, you're not breaking any rules. You're just saying, oh, I'm just taking this one tradition from this part of the world and saying, wait, we can adapt that to make this work. We don't make whiskey here. So I'm not going to attempt that because we're not really set up anymore to do that. But for those facilities, universities that want to try this, even on like a lab scale, you're talking like PhDs, because no one's doing it, but it could totally change the nature. It's like, why can't you get these fun tropical notes out of, whiskey? I mean, you can, depending on your yeast, depending on your barrel, depending on a bunch of other things, sure. But you could also then have these go-to things that you may only have to do like once or twice or 4 times a year. That would be your like super secret blending stock that would add category diversity to your product. They were like, damn, what is that? I don't know what does that, but I love it. And you would be the talk of the bourbon world or the whiskey world or whatever you want. And the cool thing is you can do it for rye. You could probably do it for malt. You could do it for bourbon. You could do it for corn whiskey. You can do it with most of the grain bases that you have. So it's a really exciting time, especially, having listened to so many of your podcasts before I came on here, just to kind of get an idea. of what this is like, which is it's amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
It's there's just so much potential out there, and then you have others like we were talking earlier about your friend Riley, who's doing amazing stuff with koji. I mean, there's all kinds of techniques if we just step back and take a high level perspective and say, okay, I wonder how that country's doing it. Why do they do it that way? I wonder if that would work here. Let's find out. And again, you can always just try on the small scale, and if it doesn't work, hey, fine, but at least you tried. And the cool thing about the industry is we talk. So
yeah, we talk so much. We like talking about nerdy things, aka the whole purpose of this podcast. No, it's such an interesting theory and thesis and proposal. I really hope that someone plays around with it personally, because we talk about, especially in Kentucky and with bourbon nerds that come and visit Bardstown, they talk about these house styles of distilleries that have developed these very specific flavor profiles over years and years and years and years. And, they use a house yeast, and that house style is that. It's very, very set. But what if you could subtly alter your house style or introduce new house styles to your existing? What if you could make it better? It's a really intriguing premise for sure. And definitely something that I think is fascinating. And I really hope, I cannot wait for you to present it at the Beam Institute. If you are listening to this and you are going to be at Beam, please go to Brett's talk and listen and replicate it for both of our sakes, because I want to hear about it.
It'll be the Wednesday session, 8:30 to 10. I don't yet know my time. And it's just mainly me talking. It's like 20 slides, 20 seconds per slide. So I can't do a deep dive, but you'll get just enough of an idea to go. I think the only thing to consider, depending on everyone's, because a lot of, these large facilities, have big cultured yeast, all those types of things. So they're using, fresh living yeast instead of, how you and I kind of did it in the industry of just rehydrating and those types of things. So as long as your yeast can handle acids, you can do this. Now, the only reason that Schizosaccharomyces pombe works is because it allows significant levels of those acids to be produced. But again, in a controlled way. So if you have a multi-million-dollar lab facility, hey, guess what? You can control this. We can't. We don't even have a microscope.
That feels like a lapse.
I know. Well, it's on the thing, but we're very happy with how we do things here. And I've got, a bunch of other yeast trials that I'm going to be doing anyways later this year.
Listen,
so
doing cell counts is hell. No one wants to do that. God, no one wants to do that at all. Just sitting there counting and forgetting where you started and then recounting. And then,
they're doing like the methyl blue and all the types of things to check the kind of bacteria you may or may not have.
And then you look up after you're done peering into that microscope for an hour and all you see is methyl blue. Like your whole world is blue. It's not great. Yeah. So switching gears a little bit, we've talked a lot about yeast and we talked a lot about practical distillation from a rum perspective. I want to talk about Rosalie Bay Distillery because this is a really, really fucking cool project that you're a part of. And I want my listeners to learn about it. So tell me what Rosalie Bay is.
Well, as you know, and as other craft distillers know, you never know who's going to walk through your front door. So one day in February 2019, a marine biologist walked into our distillery, talked to the owner, Jamie, and she called me. I was off, and she goes, "Hey, I need you to come to the distillery." I was like, "Oh shit, am I in trouble?" And I was like, "No, I wasn't." So I ended up talking with this gentleman, Jake, and he says, "Hey, I'm work in conservation. I'm trying to figure out a way of sustainably supporting, ocean conservation as well as doing community involvement and a bunch of other stuff." I was like, "Okay, cool. Where are you looking to do this?" "Dominica." "Where's that?" And then he's like, "Oh, it's here." And he shows me it's north of Martinique, south of Guadeloupe and Marie-Galante. I was like, "Cool, never been there." Show me some pictures. Like, "Wow, it's beautiful. You have like 360 plus rivers. Pirates of the Caribbean are still there. It's amazing. So you've got all these turtles and coral reefs and all that." And he said, "Cool." So a few months later in June, I was flying down there, and I fly down there, and I had to rent a car. I'd never been there. I barely had service on my phone, so I had to drive to the southeast part of the island called Rosalie, and was staying at this hotel that was being rebuilt. That hotel is where Hurricane Maria at Cat 5 made landfall. So in 2017, the island was devastated, and before that, Tropical Storm Erica devastated it again. So they lost their rum distilling traditions in the sense that the only distillery there, Makushari, that was making cane juice rum, was wiped out. And as far as I'm aware, they have yet to rebuild. So because of that, we were just saying, okay, well, sugarcane grows here. Great. Okay. I know how to make rum. Cool. You just, ferment the juice. So we had a manual crusher. We contracted to get a sufficient amount of cane to do that. And I spent, I think 16 hours just manually crushing cane. It was exhausting just to get about 25 gallons so I could scale it because I had a little 3-gallon little alembic pot still. And I was fermenting and distilling in a hotel bathroom. So the fermentation tank, little buckets are in the shower. Whenever I had the shower, I had to pull them out. And then when I had to do my distillation runs, it got really old, but I was hanging out in the bathroom distilling and using the tub as a reservoir. So we proved the concept.
Really gives you a different perspective on bathtub gin. You got bathtub rum
really.
now,
Yeah.
too.
So I have all these pictures. So I could happy to share them. But and then you fast forward 2020, we did it again. We scaled it up, but the cane mill caught fire because the motor seized up. So we then had to go to the bus station in town where the juice man was. So all the way across the island. And I'm prepping cane and we're juicing and I'm pitching, hydrating and pitching yeast on the side of the road. And there's a big crowd. It was a whole funny thing. And we drove all the way back across the island. And again, we showed that there's success there. And then, over from that point on, I helped, they built a hurricane resistant structure. I selected all the distilling equipment, fermentation equipment, boiler. I have a mechanical engineering background. So I laid out the whole facility, calculated the propane needs, all that kind of stuff. And we got it built, and we recently just produced our first full scale batch of Dominica's cane juice rum. We're Dominica single rum. It's 100% hand harvested cane from 65 different farms on the island. I've been very fortunate enough to work with another badass lady named Kearney and George. She's the head distiller. I've been able to help train her. So she was a former security guard for the hotel as well as a sea turtle patroller. So she would volunteer for this organization called DomSetco. So Dominica Sea Turtle Conservation is what the organization stands for, because the beach right by the hotel is where the turtles nest. So I was able to work with her and train her, who went from she doesn't drink really at all, to being able to go from not having any necessary palate for distilling to a palate enough to be able to make world-class rum in I'd say about 2 months of contact time, and over the course of like 5 years. So it's pretty cool to see what we've been able to do. And we recently submitted our first batch to the New York spirits competition, and we got a bronze. So hey, it's not bad considering all the chaos and challenges of just making cane juice rum. Like our cane mill that we initially got didn't work, and then we had to get a new cane mill, and it's been a long time getting here. So we're super proud, and we're really excited because we're just building out our maturation facility, and we have some Calvados casks coming in because we're a kosher distillery. So it's really hard to source equipment and barrels and those types of things. So we're really excited for the future and to showcase what we can do. And if you're interested, if you go to Rosalie Bay, RosalieBayDistillery.com, that's ROSALIE. You can see, what we're doing and our mission. And so 100% of the proceeds that we get from each bottle sale go right back into conservation efforts, as well as community projects. We're working on a scholarship and a bunch of other great stuff on Dominica. And I've been fortunate to play a small role. And I'm just very excited that Dominicans are once again sharing their culture and their rum with the world because it's delicious.
I just love that it's in Dominica because both of my parents have been to Dominica multiple times before I was born, after, when I was a baby. My mother, I'm going to tell her that you have started a distillery in Dominica, and she's going to lose her mind because my family has a connection to it. So I think that's super cool. Also, I can picture the chaos of you pressing and trying to get it going. Time is money with sugarcane juice. It starts fermenting almost immediately when it hits air. Yeah.
It's so incredibly volatile. Like when we were doing our trials, we used the EC1118 because that's kind of like the workhorse of the industry. Hey, I don't know what to do. Let's try this because it usually will work. Well, pH literally, even when I tried buffering it, would drop within 24 hours to 3.8, 3.5, just because it's so full of bacteria. And the problem is the lag phase of the hydrated yeast from kicking on. It would be too late.
Yeah,
and it would just takes off. It would just stall. So we had to work with Lalamond and Chanel Lane, who is just amazing. she helped us figure out the right yeast. So we're using Distillamax CN, which is from Brazil. It works for molasses and sugarcane because, what we were hoping to do was make a cane juice rum that was super approachable. Because a lot of times they can be really funky, really grassy, really herbaceous, really vegetal. It's very atypical for most people that are looking to drink rum, particularly unaged rum. It's a bit of a learning curve. So we ended up making something that is gently grassy, gently creamy with sweet notes of like florals, marzipan, and almond. And it's very approachable. I don't want to call it like a gateway cane juice rum, but I'll bring a bottle when I'm going to Beam Institute. I'll bring a bottle for you to try. And for anyone that wants to get it, it's Raising Glasses is our importer, and they ship direct out of Boston. So they can ship to, I think, like 45 places, like 45 states. So it is expensive, but again, 100% of that goes to supporting conservation. Like I don't see a dime from that. And it's awesome. And it's really cool to finally have this on the market. And we can't wait for the age stuff to start, maturing so we can finally release some really fun stuff too. But yeah, you can, if you ever want to go, Sydney, you can get a direct flight from Miami on American.
Don't tempt me because I'll go in a heartbeat, especially probably during the winter. Gosh, I don't like cold weather. I'm born and raised in Florida, so no sugarcane very well. There's so much rum that comes out of Florida, sure. And a lot of sugarcane is grown there. Really, really cool ethos, and like this project is really amazing. I think it's a great way to showcase that alcohol is not only agriculture, but alcohol is agriculture that can positively benefit communities when it's done right. I know the rum industry in particular has had some interesting negative attention on it in terms of like sugarcane harvesting and how it can be detrimental to some communities, but it doesn't have to be that way. And this is a really fantastic example of that. And just really, really incredible that you had your premiere at the Miami Rum Congress in January, which is awesome. How do you think other people are responding to it in the rum world? And, it's such a different process than a lot of American rum. Was there a big learning curve with trying to work with sugarcane juice versus molasses for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I told the NGO that is helped make this possible is Oceans Forward. And when I told the head of the NGO, I said, just before we begin, I just want you to know you're making this is the most difficult rum to make. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, because everything is tied to a harvest. That's why almost every distillery that makes cane juice rum, they have a Creole column still, and it's all about maximizing efficiency to be able to produce this. Okay, well, obviously we can't.
Fast.
Yeah, we can't afford a continuous. We can't afford a continuous still. So we have a technically, I guess it's a 300-gallon 4-plate hybrid still. I don't use the plates, so I mean they're in the vapor pathway. But I wanted to just make something super flavorful because I come from a pot distilling tradition. And if I'm only on island 2 weeks, I could easily spend 2 weeks just learning how to run that still with the deflemeter and all of that. I mean, we use the deflemeter, of course, to like slow down the initial heat up, to stabilize and all that. But trying to learn on the fly and then train Kernian, who's never done this before, to do that, I just said, okay, we're just going to do the pot distillation method. And then once we process and we have thousands of gallons of low wine tails, then we can explore of either making something neutral or doing a queen share, or like what we're significantly leaning to is getting a smaller 50-gallon still with plates so we can do botanical rum because everything grows on the island. Like literally when I was there once, I remember a tree limb blew down. I was like, what is that? And he's like, oh, it's a cinnamon tree. So I just peel the bark and there's like thousands of dollars of cinnamon just right there. I was like, cool, that's awesome.
I'm picturing Willy Wonka's chocolate factory when they go and they're just like grabbing chocolate off of trees.
Absolutely.
And shit. That's basically what you did, but with cinnamon. Yeah.
Yeah. So chocolate grows, vanilla grows at night. You have the mountain valley breezes because there's like 7 inactive volcanoes. You'll just smell wild ylang-ylang just blowing down the valley. It smells amazing. But yeah, no, it was definitely a steep learning curve because once it's juiced, it's fermenting. So like to give you an idea, when we had the first cane mill that we got through China, through Alibaba, which I'd never done before, long story, we had lots of problems. We had to break it down multiple times just during a crushing thing. It took us like 12 hours to crush. So we would have a fermentation already happening while we're trying to hydrate yeast and get a fermentation going. And then thanks to Richard Seal from Foursquare, he directed us to a Brazilian cane supplier, a cane mill supplier. And now we're able to get that down to 3 hours. But even then, that's still fermenting. So by the time we pitch, like it's already already happening. So luckily the Distillax has a pretty short lag phase. So it kicks on, and we were able to get to about a 5 to 6% ABV wash in about 4 days. And then we give it a few days to rest before we distill it. And because our still is slightly undersized, because budgets and all that, COVID really killed that because shipping containers went up by like 4 or 5 times. It takes us 5 days to process our fermentation, so you do get bacterial action as well. So we just make do with it, and we know how to run it. Our stripping runs go down to 5%, and then our aggregate low wines around like 25 to 26. And then we end up getting our spirit runs tend to be about 79 to 78 down to about 68, 67, somewhere in that range. And it's really challenging on the tail side because you get this bitterness that it'll present, and you're like, oh, maybe that'll be balanced out. It never really balances. So like we have to be really tight on our cuts, just because we're right now we're releasing a lot of unaged stuff, and maybe we can expand that when we have a more built out maturation program. But for right now, we're just focusing on just nail the cut points. Everyone's trained on that. And it's definitely been very challenging to learn. I would much rather work with molasses or raw cane sugar because it's easier.
Well, and it strikes me as really fascinating because Martinique Agricole, that's the big heavy hitter in terms of like fresh cane juiced rum, and has a distinctive flavor profile, and they're very efficient and very good at what they do. But because of the nature of sugarcane juice, it just immediately starts fermenting and immediately attracts bacteria. And there is a terroir in that. And you're seeing something similar with Dominica and native bacteria and native cultures that are just immediately invading. Are you seeing that this is kind of developing its own unique terroir from other traditional agricole rums versus this Dominica product that has arguably never been done before?
I would say, so we're a field blend of four cane varietals. It's Malavoie, Con Bamboo, Black Sam, and Sayaya. And they all look different, and they all taste slightly different. But because we work with 60 plus farms literally all throughout the island, and we're talking, a farm is perhaps a generous term. Sometimes it's literally a quarter of an acre, and other times it's the biggest one we have is like 2 acres, and it's all hand cut. So they'll clean it and they'll cut it, and then they bring it to us within 24 hours. So yeah, we do notice, like, I would say we're not yet to the point where we can really do a deep dive. Once we have enough stock, I would love to do single varietal expressions just to see. But I can tell you that our rum tastes very, very similar. If you were to take like an average of what cane juice and Dominica tastes like, it literally tastes just like that cane juice. Because even when you taste the cane juice, you're still going to get gentle grassiness, some creaminess. You're going to get some florals, some almond notes. So even though that yeast we use promotes that, you're still tasting Dominica. And it's very different than the other surrounding islands.
No, that's fascinating. It's such a cool project. I can't wait to taste more. Thank you so much for telling me about it. I think that's a great place to wrap up too, talking about this amazing passion project that is creating a spirit that's never been seen before in a community that is being benefited by it. That's such a really, really cool, pure philosophy for alcohol. And it's like something that I would love to be a part of one day, just something that benefits my community. And to what I do, all the people that I work with, the company that I work with is very much based in the town that I live, and it's very cool. But you take it to another level with Rosalie Bay, and it's so cool to hear about. So thank you so much for sharing about it. And I can't wait to see what you guys continue to produce over the years now that you guys are up and running.
Yeah, thank you.
So before...
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, thank you for letting me talk about it. And I will say, I think the distilling industry, especially on the craft side, I think we should seriously consider like how you have like Doctors Without Borders and those. Why don't we have Distilling Without Borders? Because distilling is literally a circular economy if done right. Like all of our waste we treat all of our own waste. So we're zero waste. So, and we're able to use some of that to help out in the local communities. So I just think it's time to have that conversation. It's like, why can't we use distilling to solve problems?
Yeah, 1,000%. Love that. So before we close out this amazing episode. As a reminder, for more than 30 years, G&D Chillers has had the proven solution for distilleries. Visit them today at gdchillers.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, go to spiritsanddistilling.com and sign up for our free newsletter featuring news stories every week from some of the best writers and distillers in the distilling world. Such great content on there. I love reading it personally. Brett, if people want to learn more about what you're working on or taste it for themselves, where can they go? What websites should they visit? You talked a little bit about where you can find Rosalie Bay, but how do I find Lyon Rum?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, lyonrum.com, that's Lyon, so it's like the French city Lyon, so lyonrum.com. If you're in the state of Maryland, you can go to the In Maryland shopping. It'll literally show you what liquor stores and wherever they are throughout the states. We also have a map kind of showing you where our distribution network is, but we do have third-party affiliates that can, ship bottles to many different places. So if you go online, we have a solution that, more than likely that can get a bottle to you. So if you go to @lyonrum.com @lyonrum on Instagram, you can see all the fun stuff that we do. And then for me, it's @almost_Icarus, because you don't want to be Icarus, but you want to be almost. You can see all the fun stuff that I do. It's not really curated. It's just a day in my life, but you will see fun stuff, and you can literally follow along and follow the whole Dominica thing, because they usually might kind of do live stories as I'm going. So you'll literally see the whole progression and all the beauty of that island. It's definitely going to be blowing up in the next few years. I mean, they're building this major international airport, so you'll be going there soon enough, Sydney.
God, I'd love to go back with my mom. I think that would be really, really cool and really special. Also, worth noting, if you're listening, Lyon is Lyon, not lion like the big cat in The Lion King. Lyon to find Lyon Rum. Thank you guys so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the content. We will be back in 2 weeks with another in-depth distilling conversation for you. Thank you again for joining us. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Spirits and Distilling for those who love to make and drink great spirits. Join our free newsletter today at spiritsanddistilling.com for pragmatic, technical, and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Sign up now at spiritsanddistilling.com or click on the link in the show notes.